At a family picnic, my nephew walked up to me and said, "Mom says you are the most selfish person here," and a few people around us actually nodded, and I smiled, packed my things, and made sure every single one of them felt that selfishness by morning. My nephew is 7 years old, and he delivered the message with the complete confidence of a child who has been told something so many times it has become his own opinion. He walked across the grass in his sneakers, the ones I had bought him for his birthday 3 months prior, and he stopped in front of my lawn chair and looked up at me with his mother's eyes and his father's chin and 31 years of my family's accumulated resentment in his small mouth, and he told me what his mother had said. Around us, on blankets and folding chairs and the edges of the picnic tables I had reserved and paid for, several members of my extended family heard him. I watched 3 of them nod. Not dramatically. The small, private nod of people confirming something they had already decided. I looked at my nephew. His name is Marcus. He is 7 and blameless, and I want to be precise about that because nothing that followed was about Marcus. I smiled at him. "Tell your mom I heard her," I replied. He ran back across the grass. I watched him go. Then I looked at the 3 people who had nodded, and I looked at the food on the tables, the food I had organized and largely paid for, and the park reservation sign with my name on it, and the coolers I had driven 40 minutes to fill that morning, and I began, quietly and without visible urgency, to pack my things. Nobody stopped me. A few people watched. Nobody said anything. I drove home and I got to work. My name is Waverly Sims. I am 34 years old. I have one sister, Renata, who is 4 years older and who has been, for most of my adult life, the person around whom my family's emotional weather system organized itself. Renata is warm and loud and present in the way that fills rooms and requires resources, and the resources, for approximately 11 years, had been mine. Not all of them. I want to be fair. Renata worked. Her husband Corey worked. They were not people who sat idle and waited for things to arrive. They were people who made genuine efforts and who also, consistently and without apparent awareness of the pattern, ended up needing something from me at the precise moment I had it to give. The first time was the car. I was 23 and had just started at the financial firm where I still work, and Renata's transmission had failed and she needed to get to her job, and could I help with the repair, just a loan, she would pay it back in 3 months. I helped. She paid back half of it 14 months later, and we never discussed the remainder. The second time was the deposit on their apartment when they moved cities for Corey's job opportunity. The third time was the legal situation that I am not going to detail because the specifics are not mine to share, but the cost was, and I shared it. The fourth through the 11th times blur together across years of smaller asks, the kind that individually seem reasonable and collectively constitute a second budget I had been running in parallel to my own without naming it. I had not named it because naming it required examining it, and examining it required deciding what I thought about it, and deciding what I thought about it would have forced a conversation I was not ready to have with a family that had organized itself around the premise that Waverly was the one who handled things. The premise was accurate. I had built it myself. I had been the one who handled things since our father's situation when I was 22, the year everything reorganized and someone needed to be the person who handled things, and I had stepped into that role with the specific competence of someone who is good at it and had not yet understood that being good at something does not mean you are obligated to do it indefinitely without acknowledgement. My mother, Denise, loved both her daughters with the genuine and complete love of a woman who had raised them through real difficulty. She also had a specific blindness about the weight distribution between them, the way parents sometimes develop a blindness about the child who asks for less, assuming the asking for less means needing less rather than understanding that the child who asks for less has simply learned the cost of asking. I had learned the cost of asking at 8 years old. I had stopped asking by 10. By 22 I had become the person everyone else asked, and I had held that position for 12 years, and I had told myself it was fine, it was family, this is what you do. The picnic was the annual summer gathering my grandmother had started decades ago. She had been gone for 6 years, and the picnic had continued because family traditions have momentum even after the person who gave them meaning is no longer there to provide it. I had organized it for the last 4 years. Reserved the park, coordinated the food, managed the logistics, driven the coolers. Every year I organized it, and every year Renata arrived with her family and her warmth and her loudness and took up the center of the gathering the way she took up the center of every gathering, and every year I sat at the edge of the thing I had built and felt, without fully naming it, the specific and visible quality of someone whose labor is received as landscape. This year I had driven 40 minutes to fill the coolers. I had reserved the shelter 2 months in advance. I had sent the coordination messages and confirmed the attendance and bought the supplies with a receipt in my bag that I had not mentioned to anyone because I never mentioned receipts, because mentioning receipts would have made me the person who kept score, and I had spent 12 years specifically not being that person. And my 7-year-old nephew had walked across the grass in the birthday sneakers I had bought him and told me his mother thought I was the most selfish person at the gathering. 3 people had nodded. I want to stay with the nodding for a moment because the nodding is the part that did the actual work of clarifying something I had been half seeing for a long time. One nod I could have dismissed. Even two. But three people, independently, in the small private way of people confirming a shared conclusion, told me that the narrative about me inside my family had a specific and settled shape. Waverly is selfish. I turned that over on the drive home. Not with anger, not yet, but with the focused attention of someone encountering a data point that requires integration. Where had the narrative come from? What had it been built from? What were its load-bearing elements? By the time I pulled into my parking garage, I had located the origin with the precision of someone who is professionally good at tracing things to their source. The narrative had been built from my nose. Not from what I had given, which was substantial and consistent and had never been refused. From the times I had said no. The cousin's request 2 years ago that I had declined because the request was not reasonable and I had declined it carefully and kindly, and the cousin had not received the kindness, only the no. The family vacation I had been invited to join and contribute to that I had declined because the timing conflicted with something I could not move, and the declination had been received as a statement about my priorities. The birthday party I had arrived at 40 minutes late because I had been at work finishing something that could not be left unfinished, and my lateness had been noted and added to the file. The no's and the lateness and the one declined vacation had become, in the family's internal accounting, evidence of a character flaw. The 11 years of yeses had become landscape. The coolers and the park reservation and the birthday sneakers and everything before them had become simply the backdrop against which my occasional unavailability was measured and found wanting. I sat in my car in the parking garage and looked at the steering wheel and felt the specific cold clarity of someone who has just seen a system clearly and understood that the system will not correct itself. Then I went upstairs and opened my laptop and began. The first thing I did was cancel the automatic transfer. 3 years prior, during a period when Renata and Corey had a genuine financial difficulty, I had set up a monthly transfer to help cover their shortfall. The amount was not enormous, but it was consistent, and I had set it up with the understanding that it was temporary, a bridge, and the bridge had extended itself across 36 months without discussion. I logged into the bank portal and canceled the transfer. Effective immediately. I did not send a message explaining the cancellation. The cancellation was the message. The second thing I did was open my email and compose a message to the Park District. The annual picnic reservation for the following year, which I had already begun the process of securing because the good shelters required early booking, was in my name with my contact information. I withdrew the reservation request. I sent a brief and professional email indicating I would not be proceeding with the booking. The third thing I did was open the shared family document where I had been coordinating a significant gathering, my grandmother's memorial anniversary dinner, which happened every October and which I had been organizing for 6 years. The document had dates and vendor contacts and a budget I had assembled across 3 weeks of logistical work. I removed myself from the document. I did not archive it. I removed myself, which meant it remained accessible to everyone else in the family who had edit access and who had not, in 6 years of shared document access, contributed a single line to its contents. Let them organize it. The fourth thing I did was send a text to my cousin Brent, the one whose request I had declined 2 years ago and whose declination had apparently been filed as evidence of my selfishness. The text was brief. I had been reconsidering, I told him, and I wanted to let him know I was withdrawing even the partial support I had offered at the time of the original request because I was restructuring my financial commitments. I was not withdrawing partial support. I had offered no support. But I wanted Brent to make a call, and Brent making a call required Brent to believe he was losing something. He called inside 20 minutes. I did not answer. The fifth thing I did was call my mother. Denise answered on the second ring with the warm evening greeting of a woman who did not yet know the weather had changed. I told her about Marcus walking across the grass. I told her about the 3 nods. I told her exactly what I had heard and exactly what I had observed, and I told her without heat, in the level voice of someone reporting accurately rather than performing injury. My mother was quiet for a long time. Renata didn't mean for him to say that, she offered. I waited. She's been frustrated lately and sometimes she says things at home she doesn't realize the kids are absorbing. Mom, I replied. 3 people nodded. Another silence. People agree with things reflexively, she tried. It doesn't mean they actually think you're selfish. I need you to hear what I'm telling you, I told her. I'm not calling to be talked out of what I observed. I'm calling because I wanted you to know what happened before you heard Renata's version of it. A pause. What are you going to do? I've already started, I replied. My mother's voice shifted. Waverly. I love you, I told her. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I ended the call and looked at my laptop screen and thought about the park reservation and the coolers and the sneakers and 11 years of landscape, and I felt, underneath the clarity, Something that was not quite anger and not quite grief but lived in the neighborhood of both. Then I opened one more tab and began drafting the letter I had been writing in my head for 11 years without knowing I was writing it. The letter was not sent that night. I want to be precise about that because sending it that night would have been heat and what I had was clarity, and I understood the difference well enough not to confuse them. I saved the draft and closed the laptop and made dinner and ate it alone at my kitchen table and looked at the wall and thought about Marcus running back across the grass, the sneakers flashing in the afternoon light, delivering a message he had been given by someone who should have known better than to give it to him. I thought about the nodders. They are 3 small confirmations of a verdict they had already rendered. The comfortable certainty of people who have decided what someone is and find the decision restful. I thought about my grandmother, who had started the picnic decades ago, who had known me in the way grandmothers sometimes know their grandchildren most clearly, who had told me once when I was 19 and frustrated about something I no longer remember, the people who take your presence for granted will notice your absence immediately. They always do. I had not understood what she meant at 19. I understood it now. I washed my dishes. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. By morning, 3 phones in my family had rung with questions I had anticipated, and not one of them had my answer yet, because the answer was the silence, and the silence was only just beginning. Renata called at 7:42 in the morning. I know the time because I was already at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, having been awake since 6, and I watched her name appear on my phone screen, and I let it ring and I took a sip of coffee and I let it ring again and then it stopped. She texted immediately after, "Can you call me when you get a chance?" Then, 4 minutes later, "It's about the October dinner." Then, 11 minutes after that, the text that told me the cancelled transfer had already landed, also the bank thing, "I think there was an error?" I put my phone face down and opened the October dinner document on my laptop. The document was exactly as I had left it when I removed myself. Dates, vendor contacts, a 6-year archive of logistics that I had assembled line by line across 6 Octobers of organizational work. All of it visible to the 7 family members who had edit access. None of it touched. I checked the edit history. Since I had removed myself at 11 the previous night, the document had been opened 4 times. No edits had been made. I closed the laptop. My mother called at 9. I answered because my mother was a separate matter from Renata and I had told her I would talk to her in the morning and I kept my word even when keeping it was inconvenient. Denise's voice had the quality of a woman who had not slept well. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She asked if I had talked to Renata. I told her not yet. A pause. Then, "She called me last night. After you called me." I waited. "She's upset," my mother continued. "She says she doesn't understand why you left the picnic." I set my coffee mug down on the table. "Mom." Her son walked across the picnic I organized and paid for, in shoes I bought him, and told me she thought I was the most selfish person there. And 3 people nodded. "I know." "Does Renata know that I know that?" A pause. I think she thought Marcus might not have actually said it. She sent a 7-year-old to deliver a message and now she's hoping he didn't deliver it accurately. My mother was quiet. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, and the question was genuine, the question of a woman who loved both her daughters and was standing in the gap between them and felt the gap clearly. "Nothing," I told her. "I don't want you in the middle of this. I want you to know what happened and I want you to know that what I'm doing is not impulsive and it's not about Marcus, and it's not even really about the picnic." "What's it about?" she asked. I looked out my kitchen window at the morning. 11 years, I replied. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again her voice had the quality of a woman arriving at something she had been avoiding. "I should have seen it better," she offered. "Yes. I'm sorry, Waverly." I looked at my coffee. "I know you are." We stayed on the phone a little longer and said goodbye with the careful warmth of 2 people who love each other, and are navigating something that is going to require more than one conversation to get through correctly. I called Renata at 10:30. She answered with the voice she used when she was managing something, warm on the surface with the structural tension of someone who has prepared several positions and is waiting to see which one is needed. She started with Marcus. She was sorry he had said that, she told me. He had overheard something and misunderstood it and she had not intended for it to reach me that way. I let her finish. "What did he misunderstand?" I asked. A pause. "It was just venting. Corey and I were talking and I was frustrated about something and I said something I shouldn't have and Marcus heard it." "What were you frustrated about?" Another pause, longer. "You left the birthday party late." I looked at the wall. "I was 40 minutes late," I replied. Because I was finishing a work deadline that I had told you about 2 weeks in advance and had asked if we could adjust the time for it, you had said no. It's Marcus's birthday. Yes. And I was there. 40 minutes late. With his gift. Which were the sneakers he was wearing yesterday when he walked across the grass to tell me what you think of me. Silence. The transfer, she started. I cancelled it. Waverly, we depend on that. I had been waiting for that sentence. Not with satisfaction exactly. With the specific recognition of someone who has heard the confirmation they needed. I know you do, I replied. That's information I needed you to have. What does that mean? It means I've been sending that transfer for 3 years past when it was supposed to end, and I've been organizing the October dinner for 6 years, and I reserved the park 2 months ago for yesterday and drove 40 minutes to fill coolers that are still in my car, and your son told me in front of our family that you think I'm the most selfish person there. The line was quiet. So I'm going to be selfish, I continued. I'm going to find out what that actually looks like. Because I think you've been calling consideration selfish for so long that you've forgotten what the real thing is. Renata's voice when it came back was lower. The management layer had dropped. I don't want to lose you over this, she told me. You're not losing me, I replied. You're losing the version of me that absorbs everything quietly and asks for nothing and shows up anyway. That version is done. Whether there's another version available depends on what happens next. She was quiet for a long time. What do you need from me? She asked finally. I need you to think about that question seriously before you answer it, I told her. Because the first answer is usually the managed answer and I've had enough of those. I ended the call and sat in my kitchen and the apartment was very quiet and the quiet was mine. The October dinner became the first test. With me removed from the document and the transfer cancelled and the park reservation withdrawn, the family encountered, for the first time in 11 years, the full weight of what I had been carrying. My Aunt Paulette called me on a Wednesday, 2 weeks after the picnic, with the careful voice of a woman approaching something she is not sure how to approach. She wanted to talk about October, she told me. The dinner. Nobody quite knew where things stood with the venue or the catering contact or the seating, and usually by this point in the summer the whole thing was already organized. I told her the document was still there. All the information was in it. The vendor contacts, the timeline, the budget structure from previous years. A pause. We were hoping you might be willing to take it on again. I looked out my window. I'm not going to take it on this year, I replied. But everything anyone needs is in the document. It's very complete. It's a lot to coordinate, she told me. Yes, I agreed. It is. Another pause. Paulette was not a bad person. She was a person who had received my organization for 6 years as landscape and was now encountering the landscape's absence and finding it disorienting. Is there anything we can do, she asked, to get you back involved? Paulette, I replied. I need the family to organize one dinner without me. That's not a punishment. It's information. Once everyone has done it once, we'll have a more accurate conversation about what's been happening for 6 years. She was quiet. Then, that's fair. Thank you, I told her. We said goodbye and I went back to my work and did not think about the October dinner for the rest of the day. Corey called on a Friday. Not Renata. Corey. Corey was a man I respected in the functional way of someone who has watched a person show up for their family across years of ordinary difficulty. He was not as loud as Renata and he saw things she sometimes missed and he called. I understood immediately, because he was the one in their household who was capable of the harder version of the conversation. He told me he owed me an apology. Not for Renata. For himself. He had watched the pattern for 11 years and he had benefited from it and he had not said anything because saying anything would have required him to also change something and changing something was uncomfortable and he had chosen comfort over accuracy. I listened to all of it. I'm not asking you to fix anything, he told me when he finished. I just needed to say it without Renata in the room. I appreciate that, I replied. The transfer, he continued. I'm going to make sure we sort that ourselves. It should have been sorted 2 years ago. Yes, I agreed. It should have. I'm going to work on the other thing too, he told me. The thing, she said. That's not something she actually believes. It's something she says when she's scared, and she's been scared that you were pulling away for a while, and instead of addressing that directly she addressed it sideways. I sat with that for a moment. Addressing things sideways is how you get a 7-year-old delivering messages at picnics, I replied. Yes, he told me. I know. We spoke for a few more minutes and ended the call with something that felt like the beginning of a more honest arrangement than anything that had preceded it. The October dinner happened. Paulette organized it. She called me twice during the process with questions I answered briefly and specifically, not taking it back, just providing information that was genuinely needed and could not be found in the document. The dinner was smaller than previous years, fewer coordinated elements, the venue less polished than what I would have arranged. My mother told me afterward that it had been nice. Warm. A little disorganized, but people had not minded. I told her that was good. People kept saying you had made it look easy, she told me. They didn't realize how much work it was until they tried to do some of it. I looked out my kitchen window. That's the point, I replied. Renata and I met for coffee in September. Her suggestion, a specific coffee shop, a time that worked for both of us, no agenda stated in advance. She was already there when I arrived. She had ordered for herself and left the menu on my side of the table, which was a small thing and also not a small thing. We sat across from each other, and for a moment neither of us said anything, and the coffee shop moved around us with its ordinary noise. She put her hands around her mug. I've been thinking about what you said, she opened. About the version of you that's done. I waited. I don't want that version to be done, she continued. But I understand why you do. And I'm not going to argue that you shouldn't. I'm going to ask what it would look like if there was a different version. I looked at my sister's face. The face I had known for 34 years, the loud, warm face that filled rooms and required resources and had sent her son across the grass in his birthday sneakers without understanding what she was sending. It looks like acknowledgement, I told her. Not gratitude performances. Not thank you speeches at family dinners. Just knowing what you're receiving. Registering it as a choice and not a feature of the landscape. She nodded slowly. It looks like Corey figuring out the transfer without being asked, I continued. Which he told me he's going to do. He told me he called you. He did. She looked at her coffee. He's better at the hard conversations than I am. Yes, I replied. I know. She looked up. The managed layer was not there. Just her face, the real one, slightly tired, slightly uncertain, the face of a woman who has been sitting with something uncomfortable for 6 weeks, and has decided to bring it directly. I'm sorry about what Marcus said, she told me. And I'm sorry that he said it because I had said it. And I'm sorry that I had said it because I had been saying versions of it to Corey for 2 years, and I never examined why I was saying it or what it said about me that I was. I sat with that. Why were you saying it? I asked. She looked at the table. Because you make everything look easy, and I needed it to be a flaw. I needed your competence to be selfishness, because if it wasn't selfishness it was just competence, and if it was just competence then I had to ask why I needed so much from you and what that said about me. The coffee shop moved around us. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in years, I told her. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let them spill, which was its own kind of effort, I recognized. I'm trying, she replied. I know, I told her. I can see that. We are not where we were. I want to be completely honest about that because the story does not have a restored ending and I will not construct one. What we have is something more careful and more accurate than what we had before. Renata and I talk. The calls are more direct than they used to be, less performance on both sides, more actual content. She asks before she assumes. I tell her when something lands wrong rather than filing it quietly. The transfer is gone. Corey handled it the way he said he would, and the handling of it was its own kind of statement that I received without comment. The October dinner is a shared effort now. 3 people coordinate it. I am one of them. Not the only one. Marcus came to visit with Renata on a Sunday in October. He sat at my kitchen table and ate the snacks I put out and told me about his class and his friends and a project about planets that he was very enthusiastic about, and at no point during the visit did he deliver any messages. Before they left, he hugged me with a complete physical commitment of a 7-year-old hug, all of his weight in it, and told me my apartment smelled good. I looked at the sneakers on his feet. Different pair. His mother had bought these. I told him I was glad he came. He ran out the door ahead of Renata and she stopped in the doorway and looked at me with a real face, the tired, honest one. Thank you, she told me. Not for the snacks. Not for the visit. For still being there. I nodded once. She left. I closed the door and stood in my apartment in the quiet that was mine and thought about my grandmother's voice. The people who take your presence for granted will notice your absence immediately. She had been right. They always are. The most selfish person there drove home with the coolers still in her car and a clarity she had been building for 11 years without knowing she was building it. Selfish is what they call you when you stop carrying what was never yours to carry alone. Let them feel the weight of what they called a personality flaw. It will teach them the word they were actually looking for.